Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Bill DeBarba. Bill DeBarba is the author of a book, The Process of Living. And you can find out more about Bill DeBarba and his wonderful work at his website, theprocessofliving.com. Welcome, Bill DeBarba.
Thank you.
So, Bill DeBarba, you've been on the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio a couple of years ago. What prompted you to create a new updated version of your book?
Well, it was interesting that I was very fortunate to get some invitations to speak very shortly after the original book was published. I spoke at a church, I spoke at a business convention. I got asked to make presentations on a monthly basis at a women's prison, Perryville Prison here in the Phoenix area. That was quite an experience. And since then, I'm also doing work for St. Mary's Food Bank. Two things came out of that. The first was that I realized that the flow of my book was not quite right. When I started putting the presentations together, I could see that, no, this should be here, this should be there. And so I had to readjust my thinking, at least on the presentations. Also, I learned a lot. I've never spent a lot of time talking to people in prison, nor people at St. Mary's Food Bank, who many of which were coming from homeless situations, some of them coming from prisons. It was kind of funny. One day, a gal was in the group at St. Mary's. She said, "Oh yeah, I heard your presentation at Perryville Prison." So that was really what prompted me, what I learned from that time period, as well as the flow problems with the book, made me get to the idea of, okay, let's see what we can do better. Let's see how we can make this better. So I redid the design. I relaid it out. One of the things I also got called on quite a bit was the fact that it was very technical in some places. So I took the technical parts, moved them to appendices, and basically said, you're interested, check it out. If not, take my word for it, keep reading. That's basically how I approached it.
So, Bill DeBarba, for our audience, will you explain what do you mean by the process of living?
The process of living is very simple. There are three components to all of us: our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. Consider the fact that all we ever do is think, feel, and do. That's it. That defines us. If we're paying attention to that, if we're understanding that, and we're coordinating that, we can accomplish so much more, both in removing things in our lives that we don't want and gaining things that we do want by making those processes work together. The whole purpose of the book is to explain that and to give you ways of doing that.
So, Bill DeBarba, I can remember literally decades ago learning a process. It's actually a coaching process involving a triangle. And let's say you want to achieve any goal, like let's say you want to become healthier. Well, you draw a triangle on a piece of paper, and on one side of the triangle, you write do. On another side of the triangle, you write B, and then another side of the triangle, you write half. So let's say I want to have a healthy body. Well, what might I need to do? Maybe I need to go for a walk regularly. What do I need to be? Maybe I need to be more mindful about the food that I put in my body. So it sounds very similar to your process, talking about thoughts, feelings, and actions. So, how do you use your process of thoughts, feeling, and actions to empower people to make change?
Well, the first step is to recognize that that change is within you. You have to start there, because unless you are cognizant of that, unless you are aware of that, You're thinking that this is going to happen if this person does this, if this company hires me, if this happens. Once you get out of that mode, you can start making progress because you have to have all three of those things working in sequence. Now, that can be a little tricky because they don't speak the same language. Your thoughts have to do with words and images. Your feelings, that's really tricky to try to describe because if I talk about being lonely, my life position may be different than yours, and your definition of lonely could be different than mine. So feelings are very much internal. And then, of course, there's the actions. There's doing things. There's speaking and listening like we're doing now. There's going for the walk, as you described. There are so many different things that you can do too many times. And I don't know if you're familiar with this. I know I have been familiar with it in the past. My thinking and my feelings are not in the same line. I really should do this. I really need to write this book, but I'm nervous. I'm afraid that it won't be taken very well. So now I have these two working against each other. The key is if you're truly wanting something in your life, you work at it in sync with all three.
Great explanation. Now, Bill DeBarba, in my work as a medical intuitive healer, I talk about the 5 levels of healing. So, what are the 5 levels of healing? I'll start with what we're familiar with when we talk about the body. When we talk about the body, that's your physical body, that's your bones, that's your organs. Then you have your energy body. Your energy body includes your chakras, the breath, and your acupuncture system. Outside of that energy body, you have the emotional body, which is what you refer to as your feelings. And then there's your mind, which is what you refer to as your thoughts. So your mind is your thoughts, your beliefs, that's your mental operating system. And
Mhm.
then finally, there's your soul. And when I do medical intuitive readings, I read the 5 levels of healing. And then when I do healing work, I do work on all 5 levels. What's interesting to me from 31 years of experience, we have to understand that your soul controls your mind controls your feelings control your energy, and your energy body controls your physical. So dis-ease begins in the field. So when you experience dis-ease, it's already happened somewhere on the soul level, on the mind level, on the emotional, on the energetic, before it comes in and hits our physical. And when we want to heal, we have to resolve the issues on all 5 levels of healing. So you talk about your process as a process. So what can you walk us through what comes first, what comes second, what comes third?
Well, that's an interesting question. Depending on the situations, there could be different sequences of these things. For example, if I'm driving in traffic and someone cuts me off, there could be a feeling that triggers before my thought that what's wrong with this person. You know, it could be triggered first from the feeling. Other times, and many times, it starts with thinking. I begin by thinking, I wonder if this would be good. Someone just said this to me. Maybe I should do something with this. And then, of course, there's doing. There's the actual doing of the things. The thing that is the most important in the sequence that you were talking about, in my mind, that you were talking about, and what I'm talking about, is at the feeling level. The feeling level is, to me, the most critical because it is the most honest. You can convince yourself to think or do anything, but you can try and kid yourself about your feelings, but you know what those feelings are. You know what's going on inside, even if you can't put words to them. You understand that. And to me, that is the center point. That is the center point from which I believe the soul operates. This is where it takes its message. This is where it's looking to answer us more at that level than any other. Now, obviously, if you have all three working together, that's even better. Then your chances of attaining happiness, goals, whatever, become much clearer. But you have to be aware. You have to be aware.
So I agree with what you're saying that resolving our emotions is absolutely critical for healing. And emotions can literally shut down any process in the body, right? Whether it's at the soul level or at the mind level and so on. And when I'm doing my healing work, I always look for what are the emotions that are underlying any dis-ease. Now, many people try to resolve emotions through talk therapy, which I feel has its place at a certain phase of healing, but not at all phases of healing. Why? What is your opinion of talk therapy, and when is it helpful and when is it not helpful?
Well, I have to admit, I'm not that familiar with talk therapy, but it would seem to me that it would be most meaningful. It would seem to be most meaningful when you have really come to terms with understanding your feelings and not see what happens is too many times we try to make our feelings the responsibility of someone else. I feel this way because he did this. I feel this way because she said this. As long as we're there, then I can go into talk therapy and talk about him and her and this and that. It's not going to help. There has to be an awareness and an ownership of the feeling. Now, with that, then I can start working through therapeutic means to try to resolve that. And by the way, I agree with you. The feelings are the number one factor in all of our physical conditions, good or bad. Feelings have the strongest impact.
So this is my experience after 31 years in natural healing. When you have an emotion, for the first 6 days that you go through this, it's at the conscious level, right?
Yes.
When you don't resolve your emotions, then after 21 days, they actually go into your physical body. So, what I find as far as talk therapy and traditional coaching, that initially talk therapy can be helpful to help you be aware of what you're feeling and perhaps to help you recontextualize what you're feeling. But if you're still talking about what you're feeling 10 years, 20 years, 30, 40, 50, 60 years after it happened, then what you're doing is you are maintaining that same energy field. You're on a mental level, you're staying stuck. And so I find that talk therapy is initially helpful at the beginning when things first happen, but after 21 days, then if you haven't fully resolved an emotion, then it's actually going to be in your physical body. It's going to be affecting your organs, it's going to be affecting your physical health. And what I find is that in the later stages that other modalities other than talk therapy are more helpful because it's going to be moving the energy out of the body and out of the energy field, if that makes sense.
It does. It absolutely does. We've all heard stories about people that carry on with pain for years and decades. I
Right.
mean, I've read the story and I don't know if it's true or an analogy or whatever, but a woman going to help with someone who was going to give him some counseling. And when they got to the beginning and well, what causes the problem? And she talks about her husband had cheated on her and they got divorced and it was an ugly divorce and all of that. And he'll ask, well, the counselor, I'm sorry, would ask, well, how long ago did this happen? And she would say, well, it was 30 years ago. And people can hold on to pain for a lifetime. And you're absolutely right. The physical part of you that gets affected by it and that you treat with drugs and visits to the doctor and all of these things that in many cases have a good value, don't get me wrong. But if it's all going on because of you holding on to the feeling, no drug is going to fix that for you.
That's right. And so when we keep telling ourselves the same story 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years and so on, we're going to have the same feelings and it's going to be already deeply embedded in our body. So I just feel that talk therapy has its place at a certain point in healing, but not at all phases. Now, your book is called The Process of Living. What kind of influence does this process have on our lives?
In my opinion, it is all of the influence on our lives. Once we're ready to let go, as I mentioned a moment ago, let go of making other people responsible. I tell a story that is not, it's in my book, and it's not a specifically true story, but I guarantee you it's happened many times. Bunch of folks at work, they always leave and get together at the local bar. They have a few drinks, they complain about the boss and whatnot. And maybe you've been told, hey, you shouldn't really be doing that. Go do something else. No, I have to. These are my friends. These are the people I work with. And so you do this every day and you go home. And then one day you have a couple of more beers than you normally do. And you get up thinking, I don't know. Oh, I only live 3 miles away. It'll be fine. And then you run a red light and you kill somebody.
Mm.
And when the police arrive on the scene, try telling them that it's not your fault. It's because of your friends. See, you can give up the power, but you can't give up the responsibility. Now, that's a dramatic example, but it applies in everything. As long as I'm not making any progress toward my goals because these people are blocking me, then you will not make progress on your goals. There's no solution until you let go of giving those people control or the circumstance or the economy or anything, whatever it is. If it's outside of you, you've given it up, you can't make progress.
So, in your opinion, how critical is it to take personal responsibility for our healing?
If you don't do that, you're not going to heal. It is the most critical because then what I'm doing is I'm not taking blame. I'm giving myself the power. I'm giving myself the ability to be able to look for solutions that will work for me and not make somebody else responsible or some of the situation responsible. So to answer your question, it is the most important thing.
I fully agree with you. And I think that's one of the basic principles behind natural healing, that we honor and respect the opinions of professionals and people who studied for decades in the process of healing. But as we tune into ourselves and we make the choices, what's right for me in this situation? How do I want to heal my cold? How do I want to heal my depression? How do I want to, get out of prison or overcome homelessness? And what steps can I take? So with that, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. We're listening to Bill DeBarba, author of The Process of Living. We'll be right back. Bill DeBarba, author of The Process of Living. You talk about the process of living as being thoughts, feelings, and actions. Can you give us a concrete example of how a person, one of our listeners, could use your process of thoughts, feeling, and actions to achieve better health?
Well, I think it begins with the thought and the feeling together, the desire for better health. Because getting better health, depending on the situation you're in, can take a great deal of effort or may not be that difficult. It really depends on that situation. We have a problem in this country, maybe worldwide, I don't know. Obesity is overwhelming. And I see parents in stores and children, the children are almost as wide as they are tall. It's a heartbreak when I see this. What does it mean to overcome that? Since it's so common, it's a good example to use. What does it mean to overcome that? Well, first has to be the thought, I want to fix this. I can do it and I want to fix it. What feeling does that bring forward? Does a feeling come to you inside of a strong desire, a feeling of power? This is what I want. Or is the feeling of, well, maybe it's not necessary? See, that's what drives it. And then, of course, the actions. Do you change your diet? Do you start exercising? Start at a lower level, work yourself up. Do you work with nutritional experts if necessary to help you to work your diet out? You will do that if the desire at the feeling level is there. You will not do that if someone else told you you need to lose weight and you're not really feeling it inside as a need, because then you're just spinning your wheels. Nothing's really going to happen.
So how can we motivate ourselves using your process?
Well, my process is launched by the motivation. The desire has to be there, then put the process to work. By itself, the process, as I describe it, the thoughts, feelings, and actions are the launching of whatever it is that has come into your awareness, to your attention, to your visibility, however you want to say it, that I really want to get this job. I really want this degree. That's where it starts. Then the process kicks in. Okay, how do we do that? I talk about the subconscious mind. Some people refer to that as the soul. Some people refer to that as divine energy. I don't really care what name you give it, but there is a power within you that will go to work for you and move you in the direction you want to go, but it doesn't judge. You can be heading yourself in a very dangerous or difficult, or, well, not so much difficult, but a part that is not helpful to you, a part that's going to make things worse for you. That energy behind you is your servant. It'll do what you want. It will do whatever it is you pointed to. It will attract to you everything you need to get to your goal, regardless of the value of your goal or the morality of your goal or whatever it might be that you want to define it as. That's really where the process comes in. Once you're ready to launch, now we can put this to work.
So, Bill DeBarba, what stumbling blocks do you find people encounter most often when they're trying to use your process of living?
Well, it's kind of like I mentioned before. The biggest stumbling block is the feeling of, I can't do this. I need someone else to take this on for me. I can't make this happen. It's not within my power. That's the biggest block. That's the biggest block, because trying to get somebody else to do it for you doesn't work. I'm not saying you can't get help, but you have to be the driver. It can't be someone else.
So, several times in your book, you mention the value of meditation, and the values of meditation are very well established. How does meditation apply using your process of living?
Well, we live in a society where, and it's getting better, but we do still live in a society that focuses its energy on your thoughts and your actions. This is how we're going to judge you. What you think and do is what we're going to judge you. But there's feelings back there, very powerful feelings. What does meditation do? Meditation is how you segregate out and get more in touch with the feelings. That's how you identify feelings and separate them from the thoughts. Because in our society, that all gets put together, and they have to work together, but they're not the same thing. And the strength is in the feelings. So getting in touch with that helps you to make your decisions about what it is you want to do to be in tune with it. If you're never in tune with it, it's pretty hard to follow along.
So, how does the process of meditation help us separate out our thoughts from our feelings?
Well, there are, as you know, thousands of meditation techniques. I talk about it when I give my speeches, and I say, look, the simplest one, sit in a comfortable position, close your eyes, and just focus on your breathing. The whole purpose of that is to quiet the mind. And the quieting of the mind is where you get the benefit of the meditation. If you spend a half an hour or an hour thinking about what you have to do today and who you have to talk to and what the problems are, don't waste your time. If you have to at least make, now don't get me wrong, your mind will go off. I've been doing this for decades and I still have days. My wife tells me, I'm at the point where I'm supposed to be retired by now, and that doesn't seem to work for me. But I am a type A, and I sit down sometimes in my meditation room. I have a room dedicated for it. And there are days after about 5 or 10 minutes, I will say, okay, forget it for right now. I'll come back later because I can't seem to put the thoughts out for more than 5 seconds at a time. So it's a challenge for me. But there are other days where it really does happen. I really am able to keep the thoughts separate for a while. The feeling of, I don't even know how to describe it. You feel a feeling of a special kind of energy when you're done with that meditation. It feels wonderful. The more I can do it, and I do work it on a schedule. I can't say, well, I'll meditate sometime today. No, get up in the morning, and that's the first thing I do. And then I might even do it at night because it does help me sleep. If I were a little more regular about it, it would help me sleep better. But the fact of the matter is you must be able to close the mind, at least some, in order to be in touch with the feelings. That's the purpose of meditation.
Now, your process of living includes thoughts, feelings, and actions. And as I mentioned in my work as a medical intuitive healer, one of the things that I do in medical intuitive readings is I will identify, is this person identifying thoughts that are holding them back from their healing? For example, I'll give an example. All women, when they reach the age of 35 in my family, need to get a hysterectomy, right? Or everybody in my family has heart disease, or everybody in my family, suffers from addiction, or fill in the blank, right? So it's a thought that's holding you back. How, in your opinion, Bill DeBarba, author of The Process of Living, how can a person tell if the way they are thinking is actually hurting them?
If I'm thinking, or if a woman is thinking that everybody in my family has a hysterectomy at whatever age you mentioned, I forgot. And that thought leads you to, I'm going to have a hysterectomy. That's where the problem comes in. What you're saying about the other women in your family may be true, probably is true. But what does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to have to because they've had it? It's the same kind of a process. That's the thought. And I'm sure you've experienced this in your healing efforts, that people are taking in things that are happening around them and assuming that by definition, that means it's going to happen to them. That's really where it comes in. How do I let go? It goes back to what I was saying about making others responsible and not you. They may not be responsible in the sense they're doing something to you, but if they're having the situation and you feel like, well, because they are, then I are, then you are giving them power.
Right. Now, what I find as a medical intuitive healer, everyone thinks, well, because my thoughts are invisible, it's so easy to change them. And what I find is that when many people's mental thoughts and beliefs are very cemented, it's like, well, for example, you have to get old, and as you get older, another thought is, when I get older, I'm going to get sicker, right? That's a very common thought. All right. How can people, and I'm going to say cancel that because that's not what I believe at age 65. How can we go about creating better thoughts?
I think that the awareness, and I know I keep coming back to the same principle, but it applies universally. That being that if the thoughts that we're having are not going to lead us, we have to be aware that they're not going to lead us. If I just take the assumption, well, I'm 76, by the time I'm 80, I'm going to be losing my memory. I'm going to not be able to do the things that I'm doing today. If I have that thought, you'll make it come true. Without question, you will make it come true. So how do I get out of that thought? The only way I know is to recognize that that's what you're doing to yourself. Without that recognition, it's impossible. If I don't recognize that I'm doing this to me, then I'm saying, no, it's happened to everybody in my family. The example you used earlier, it happens to everybody in my family. If I'm thinking that, I don't have control of what happens to everybody in my family. If I think that's inevitable to me, then it's going to be inevitable to me. And the recognition, the whole purpose of my book is to recognize that you have this capability to release the responsibility for your life to someone else. Because the concept, you can give other people the power, but you can't give them the consequences. The consequences are going to be you. They're going to happen with you. And they're inevitable as long as you give the power to someone else, to some other situation. That's the difference. Until you start thinking that way, it's very hard to get back.
And with that, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors here at UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. And we're listening to Bill DeBarba, author of The Process of Living. We'll be right back. So, Bill DeBarba, as you know, the terms mental health and emotional health are often used interchangeably. In your experience as the author of The Process of Living, how can changing our thoughts create better emotional health?
As I mentioned, the three work together, and I'm including action, things that you do. They do work together. If we have our thoughts in one direction that we're trying to change to more healthy, the feelings that we have really don't have any choice. If we're focused, the feelings will come along. If we are, but not necessarily right away, because let's face it, our feelings, our subconscious, are very much aware of what we've latched onto for whatever, 1 year, 50 years. It makes a difference because the feelings aren't ready to let go of how they identify themselves. This is me. This is who I am. I start with the thoughts to say, I don't want to be that anymore. And the feelings are pretty much sitting there saying, okay, prove it to me. Show me your thinking. Show me the things that you do that are different. You do that, and the healing at the feeling level, I believe, will come along with it. Now, Catherine, I don't have the experience you do in this kind of healing. And so I'm sure that I'm, in many ways, probably oversimplifying. But I do believe that they are connected in a way that you have to stay with it and create a whole new habit and have the feelings come along with that. You can also heal at the feelings level too. And that's what you do. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. But they have to be together one way or another. They have to be together.
So, great information. So, from my 31 years of experience, I'm going to put it as simply as I can. So, you're talking about understanding things simply. Your emotions are a consequence and a direct do not pass go, do not collect $200 result of your thoughts. So if I'm feeling a certain way, so if I'm always feeling anxious or if I'm always feeling depressed, then what I want to look at is what are the thoughts that I'm holding in mind that are causing me to feel this way, right?
Right.
So, for example, two of my books are about how to heal depression naturally without drugs. And of course, there's many different layers to that. I believe over 12% of the US population over the age of 12 is on some form of psychiatric medication. And so
Wow.
people are using drugs, psychiatric drugs, rather than inquiring into this process that you're talking about. So again, if I'm feeling depressed, I might ask myself, well, what thoughts am I holding? Am I thinking I'm a failure? Am I thinking the universe is a cruel, ugly place? Am I thinking that no one likes me? Am I thinking I'm not good enough or I don't have enough? What are my thoughts that are creating my feelings? And same thing, if you're feeling anxious, well, maybe you need to look at do I truly believe that the universe is a friendly place to me? Do I truly believe that I'm loved and supported? Do I truly know and experience that I have everything that I already need in order to fulfill my soul purpose? So, can you give some examples of people that you've worked with who've experienced healings and transformation as a result of following your process of living?
I have to tell you, first of all, that one of the things you just said really struck me. Over the age of 12? Really? Wow.
Yeah,
That's a little bit frightening, bringing up a generation that's going through that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah,
Um,
that's why I run the Natural Healing Show to talk about how can we do this differently, right?
yes,
And what you're talking about, how can I change my thinking in order to feel differently?
right.
And then actions follow along with that, right?
Actions pretty much will come along almost on their own if you have the others in line. But let me ask you a question. You talked about how the thinking is the direct source of the feel and what causes the feelings to be what they are.
Yes.
Okay. What in your mind is the process of when you start to change your thoughts? Because I believe it somewhat works both ways. When you start to change your thoughts and you're disciplined enough to keep the thoughts the way you would like them to be, the way you want the universe to be, the way you want your career, your life, your relationships to be. What is the process in terms of time? And that may not be a fair question, but do the feelings react immediately? Do they take a little longer? What, in your experience in doing this, I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but in your experience of doing this, what is the length of time and strength of focus that makes that happen?
That's a great question. And the short answer is that it's individual for each person. And when I'm doing healing work, the solution for everyone is different. However, this is the short answer is it's different for each person.
Okay,
Here's actually the truth. One of the things that we know is that whatever whatever I focus on is what expands. Whatever I focus on is what expands. So I'll use a simple example. My website, Catherine Carrigan, it's full of photographs of angels and orchids and really all that's beautiful in the world. And when I focus on all that is good, and I'm terrible at quoting, but I think there's even a quote from the Bible, think on these things. Think on these things. So when I focus on love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, and tolerance and self-control, then I notice more of that. It's kind of like if I said, I want you to go find a yellow VW bus. You'd be like, oh, they don't exist. But if you went out looking, you might find one, right?
right.
So on the other hand, if I focus on war, destruction, racism, prejudice, poverty, lack, and inadequacy and cruelty, then that's more also what I experience more of. And I feel it. And so again, the longer answer is to train your mind to focus on love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, tolerance, and self-control. And when you train your mind to focus on those things, um, then you're going to experience more of that. And it's not a Pollyannish attitude. It's just like setting aside what you don't want more of in your life. And if you study Tai Chi, which is a form of natural healing, Tai Chi is a very advanced form of managing conflict. And if, let's say, I try and punch you, well, if you stand there and take it, the punch is going to land. But if you simply evade, you step out of the way, then the punch doesn't land. And so by focusing our minds on love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, tolerance, and self-control, you are directing the energy of your life, you're directing your thoughts, and you're directing your feelings. And as you say, the actions will follow. So, and it's really a matter of paying attention. It's like, okay, well, I can let the cruelty, lack, the prejudice, the inadequacy, the feeling not good enough to take over me. And then the more I focus on that, the more I'm going to experience.
I know, and I agree with you on that completely. The focus is the key. What you focus on is what you draw into your life. Your subconscious, your soul is going to go after what you tell it that you want. And you may not think of it as I want this, but if you're focusing on it, that's what you're telling it. That's what it's going to draw into your life. You talk about quoting, and I'm no better, but there is a quote, if I can remember it correctly, from the Bible. Therefore, I say to you, that for which you pray and desire, know that you have received it, and it will be granted to you. I believe that's in Mark 11:24, if I'm remembering correctly. Know that you have received it. What you're doing is wonderful, focusing on the things that you want, and then knowing that is in my life. I'm just waiting for it to arrive. And that is what drives it more than anything else, is the knowing. You have to have what you're talking about. You have to have it. You have to have the positive. You have to have the more upbeat. You have to have the things that are you don't feel you have in your life, but you want. Once you know that they're there, they'll come.
So I remember when I studied medical intuition, the lady that I studied with, she said everyone needs to have a foolproof positive thought. So what is a foolproof positive thought? Um, I'm going to give my example. My example is when I think about hugging my puppy. I have a little Cocker Spaniel. She's 9 years old. She's cute. She's a little beast. She's fluffy. She's always getting everything. When I think about hugging my puppy, I immediately go into an inner state of deep contentment and joy. And so when you have a foolproof positive thought, when you notice, okay, I'm going into focusing on the cruelty, the deprivation, and all that's wrong in the world, and then I'm expanding that in my consciousness and my feeling and felt experience. Well, if you have that foolproof positive thought, you can always catapult yourself out of that state. And it's not only out of a state of thinking, but also a state of feeling.
And you know it. You know when you pick up that dog, how you're going to feel. And I don't want you to talk to my wife because she's talking about getting another dog, and I'm not necessarily feeling good about that. That's me. But you know that feeling. You know when you pick up that dog what it's going to do for you. And it does. It does it because you know it and it's there. It's there for you. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The knowing. Finding the things that will give you the knowing of what you really want and trust it.
So, Bill DeBarba, you are currently speaking to a global audience. What message do you want everyone to take away from your life's work and your beautiful book?
The message, first of all, thank you for that. But the message that I want people to take is the understanding of the power that is within them and the trust of that power. In effect, designed by thought, feeling, and action. But to be honest with you, it doesn't matter how you look at it. It only matters that you know it's within you and that no one, nothing can take that away from you. What's in here, in your heart level. Nobody can take it away unless you let them, unless you give them the power and define yourself by what they're doing and saying and thinking and not you. That's the message that I want to give everyone.
So, Bill DeBarba, if someone's listening to this broadcast and they recognize that they've given their power away in all the different ways that we do as humans, how can we take our power back?
The first step is recognizing that you can. Until you know that you can't even begin. That's the first step. I can take this back. Now, I promise you, you will be given many examples in your life that is going to try to pull that back away from you. But once you have established it, and once you're willing to push that aside and say, no, they don't control me, I'm the one who decides the kind of person I'm going to be. What happens? That soul goes out there and says, this is what you want. Let me find you the people. Let me put out the frequency to find you the people, the places, the things. I can tell you stories about my life where I focused on something and had no idea how it was going to happen, but it happened. And of course, that just builds up your confidence in the whole process. And what brought me to the point of even writing the book. That's what I want people to remember. Take the control. Don't give it away. I don't care how strong it feels in the wrong direction. Let it go. Stay within here. That's my message.
You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. Our guest today, Bill DeBarba, is the author of The Process of Living, and you can find out more about Bill DeBarba and his wonderful work at his website, theprocessofliving.com. And remember, one of the core principles of natural healing is you have the power. Use your power to create better health and begin by thinking and choosing to focus on all that is good and wonderful in life. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.